we were talking about Juwan Howard and how good a coach he is. Who's the best X's and O's coach in the game right now? Sean, we'll start with you. Who's the guy you don't want to see with equal talent across the other sideline?
Well, I would preface my comment or my selection just on this, Jeff. It's a very difficult question because there are so many good coaches.
Yep.
There are so many good coaches that aren't blessed with the talent, but if you just look at them as tacticians or on game day, you're envious at how well their teams execute and play. Bob McKillop comes to mind. When you watch a Davidson team play, they're so
steal
sharp.
Arches. That was Arches. You can't steal his pick.
See, we don't always talk about these things, so I didn't know that. But look, I'm going to give you my pick. All right, and I'm going to go with the two-headed monster because I can't really pick one of these guys over the other. But in today's world, winning, coaching, total package, Scott Drew and Bill Self are 1A and 1B. And I would also say you have to consider the league that both of them make their living in.
Yeah.
When you consider how tough the Big 12 has been the last couple of years and how well their teams have performed, and not always under great conditions. It's not as easy to attract great talent to Waco, Texas, and Baylor as it is North Carolina and Chapel Hill.
Sure.
And because Bill Self, with all that their program has been under, to watch him do it in spite of that, to watch him do it time and time again. And if you look at both of those coaches, what I love about both of them, as much as you fall in love with who they are on defense, well, then you can also fall in love with how they coach the game on offense. They do it both on offense and defense. And I would also say it's easy to talk about those two coaches right now because I think both of their teams are really good. It'll be interesting to see who will win the Big 12 this year. Would it be Kansas or Baylor? And I think it'll come down to those two.
It's amazing to me, Arch, that we're saying that about Scott Drew now, because you guys know, both of you know, you've been around long enough. 10, 15 years ago, he was kind of a laughing stock within the industry to some degree. He really was. It was always, he can't coach. I kept hearing that. And, you wonder, I've talked to him about this, how much it affected him. But I would always see him march at AU events. The one thing he'd be doing, whoever he was sitting next to, and I don't know if he ever did this with either one of you, he would be picking their brain about something, constantly trying to learn while trying to, again, watch high school players.
Yeah,
He
Scott Drew
deserves credit. he is a phenomenal basketball coach. Phenomenal.
My first encounter with him was in 2014 or 14 in Maui. And we had a really good team that year in Maui. And we played his team in the second round of Maui to go to the championship. And he had on that team, Gary Franklin Jr., he had Isaiah Austin, he had Rico Gathers. He had a talented big. It was just like the layup line was scary. But I remember talking to him, and I remember him saying how important the games in Maui were to his team before they got started, because they really needed to prove that they were tough enough, that they were good enough to be a tournament team. And I remember him talking about that team, and now thinking where he's at right now. And the way that we talk about him, you're talking about that quest to get better and try to continue to prove yourself that you're a program that belongs. He was on that quest, for a long time. But I remember the team that he had when we played him there, and the talent, and it was just like, they were trying to prove themselves. And I think they've gotten to a point now, obviously, where there's none better right now at what they're doing.
Hey, look, Bill Self, too. Let me just say, Bill Self,
He's ridiculous.
Among the great accomplishments in college basketball coaching is the fact that they won 12 Big 12 championships in a row. So let's think about this. On one hand, you're talking about how difficult, deep, and talented the Big 12 is and has been for some time. And then simultaneously with that, you're saying, and by the way, Kansas has won it 12 years in a row.
Crazy.
I don't think I need to say anything.
What he's done is incredible. His home winning percentage over his head coaching career at Kansas And I'm sure if you back it up to, Illinois and Tulsa, but his home winning percentage at Kansas over 18 years is damn near 90%.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point he had more Big 12 titles than he had losses at Fog Allen. I mean, it's just like a dominance that like you've never seen.
Jeff,
feel
the other
like with
part about Scott
Purcell-
Drew, the other
Yeah.
part about Scott Drew is what Arch just said. He doesn't have the advantages of home court, even in tonight's game. If you watch Baylor,
Very
when we
true.
played them a couple years ago, their football team had a Big 12 championship and it was in the way of the game. And we moved the game time up so that more people could come to our game. But Arizona at Baylor, and that was like the year before. I mean, they were great. They had a really good team. I mean,
Half full.
it wasn't a great crowd tonight. They're the defending national champions. They're playing Oklahoma. They're number one in the country. So just think about how well he's done there.
Yeah, without
Yeah.
the built-in advantages.
Yeah,
that
and
Bill
then on
Self-
the other hand, Kansas has that advantage.
Right.
Baylor doesn't, and that's why I chose those two coaches. There's so many other great coaches. I mean, you could just snap your fingers. Chris Beard, once he gets both feet on the ground at Texas, I mean, they're good this year, but they could become unstoppable. But based on the last 3 years, I'm going with Bill Self and Scott Drew.
Who else are you going with, Art? Scott Drew and who else?
Scott Drew's great. I'm just going to go with two guys that I've went up against face to face and actually have had to deal with them on game day and preparation. And first, I would say that Coach Beeline, if you've ever had to prepare for his team or play against his teams, there's probably not very many guys from an X and O standpoint that knows how to operate offensively in terms of dictating the game, tempo, game-winning plays, be able to manipulate the game with his offense is Coach Beeline. Now, obviously, he's not in college basketball right now, but he's one of the best that I've ever seen. But, Purdue is doing so well. But I think if you go back to Matt's tenure at Purdue, 18 years, I was an assistant for Thad at Ohio State in 2007-8. Matt was with the baby Boilers. At that time, it was Robbie and those guys were freshmen and sophomores. And he's pretty much stayed with it the whole time. And the one thing about him from an execution standpoint, from a belief in how they play, he hasn't really deviated from, the old school Purdue Coach Katie. But I think what he's done, and he's really morphed into an unbelievable set play program. They operate from a playbook, and how you play and who's on your team guarding their players. That's how they call the game, and they go at your worst defenders. They know how you play certain actions and whatnot, and they run the hell out of it. And he's a big believer right now, I think, in having the biggest human being you could possibly get with the most skilled players around him. And he knows exactly how to operate like that. And they've been as good as there is in terms of execution. And then I think Bob McKillop, being at Davidson for as long as he's been, he hasn't changed much either in terms of his philosophy. And I think he has it down. But they're as hard to guard as any team that you'll go up against. And it's an awkward way of playing now, but it probably wasn't 10, 15 years ago. But the pace that they play at and the motion and the offensive concepts that they run are really hard to guard. And I think if you're a guard in general, from Steph Curry to Jason Richards to Jack Gibbs to Kellen Grady, if you're a point guard or a skilled guard who can shoot, you're going to have one hell of a career at Davidson playing for him. It is an unbelievable way to play as a perimeter player, especially a point guard or a two guard or a guy who can really shoot the ball.
Is that
Sean,
it? How many guys did he mention? He mentioned 4.
I only mentioned 2.
I mean, you talk
Two
about
coaches.
being a member of the coaching fraternity. What about Nico
About
Medved?
2.
What about Nico Medved? Let's get the Colorado State.
They won tonight. They won tonight.
You
I'm
guys,
going to give Nico that.
How about
That's
Gino
always the
Ariema?
thing.
Have you gone to the women's
I'm
game?
scared of him. I'm scared of him.
You
He
should
may get after me.